Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We are on episode 121, coming at you on a late Saturday night, and tomorrow is daylight savings time, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Or today. Tomorrow, I don't know. It happens at midnight, so I guess technically tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I think we lose the 1 o'clock or the 2 o'clock hour.
Yeah, it's weird. It used to, well, first of all, let me start off by saying you and I have been adamant about how much we love the sun and daylight and being outside. So I'm certainly welcoming it. But I remember one time, this is very frustrating to me. Every time I think of daylight savings time, I think about this. Now this is the spring ahead. So the story I'm talking about refers to the fall back. So when you lose an hour of daylight, I remember that the night of that I was working at the nightclub. And we had to lose an hour, which meant that, we turned the clocks back an hour, which meant that I had to work an extra hour of my shift at the nightclub. And I just remember how frustrating that was, like looking at the clock and seeing it hit 1 o'clock a.m. twice during my shift.
And I used to get mad about it too, because working, when you're an hourly employee, you work an extra hour for free.
Yeah.
But at the backside, at the end of the year, when you get to spring forward, you work an extra hour you get paid for it. So, you make it up, but it's like 12 months later or 8 months later.
And I'm all in favor of more daylight. Obviously, I think like everybody I talk to, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the majority of our listeners are local because of like family, friends, and all the people, coworkers, all the people that we network with regularly. So I'm not sure how other people feel if we have a lot of listeners out. I mean, obviously we have listeners nationwide, but the majority of them kind of relate to how we do, where it's kind of doom and gloom living in northeastern Ohio.
Yeah. Especially because yesterday it was 60 degrees and I woke up this morning with 6 inches of snow on my porch.
Yes. Yeah.
Frustrating
to say the least, especially when, like you alluded to, there's that tease where it gets really, really warm out. One day this week, I think we were upwards of 70, and within a few days, we have a couple inches of snow, which completely catches you off guard. So
absolutely. I think this will be our last push of snow.
You know what? I've said that a couple times, but I don't know if I really believed it. But this time I'm truly optimistically and logically hoping that this will be it.
Yeah, me too.
We're nearing the end. So anyway, got an early morning training session planned for tomorrow morning, per usual.
Yes.
Actually, coincidentally enough, Sundays are the least of our early mornings.
Yes.
So I have
our late morning
session. Yeah, I have a group session that I start at 8 o'clock. And so that's right when the gym opens. So our training camp and us, we go in a little bit earlier. And I kind of discussed it with you guys since we've been training together about how I'd prefer to go a little bit later on those days, just because I'd like to finish up the workout right around 7:30, 8 o'clock. So that way I wouldn't have a ton of downtime. And so we're going to go in at 6 tomorrow, 6:30, and get 6:30 by the time we get started, and get some good work in and go from there. It's always nice having a group that you're looking forward to seeing at the gym.
Absolutely. I agree.
I think it's like one of those things, because you and I talked briefly before we got on air about how your work ethic, and I don't just mean you referring to you specifically, but the universal pronoun of you seem to get a much better workout when you have people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And people that are going to push you.
Well, I think that's the key, because you mentioned briefly before we started recording, so we kind of were talking about this a little bit informally, said that you don't see how anybody could get a better workout alone than they would with other people. And I think that would be true given the parameters that the other people are who they need to be. So when you think about training with other people, it really could be one of two paradigms. Either I'm training with people because they're pushing me and they're making me better, and in years past, I've had this issue with training partners, even some of them in college, where it detracted from the quality of the workout. I've actually been blessed enough where I have a pretty good gauge of things in terms of like, I don't want to say allowing people to train with me like it's a privilege, but sifting through who I should and shouldn't spend time with. And then also, I think part of it's a testament to transparency and just being open with people like, hey, I don't think you training with me is a good idea. So I've had really good experiences with the training partners that I've had in the past, like in college and beyond and through adulthood. But the group that we have now is bigger than I've ever had, but it's not necessarily detracting from quality or from the tempo of the workout or anything like that, because we kind of problem solve around it. So I think that
Right.
people who train alone, and maybe, like you said, maybe some people just prefer to train alone.
Right. And it's something that I've always thought about, because like I did it for a while. I did the whole alone training thing, and I felt at the time like I was getting really good quality workouts in. But once I had a nice sample size to sit back and look at like progress and where I'm at, and as far as, strength and weight loss and endurance, the markers weren't moving, even though I felt like I was doing well. And then now, so fast forward to now where I've been back in a good group. We have this really solid group of guys that we train with now. And it's been about the same amount of time that I looked at before.
Mm-hmm.
And the changes have been astronomical.
Yeah.
So I think that leads towards, I don't know. I feel like as a training, as a I guess athlete, right? I mean, not know that I'm actually an athlete, but a person who works out, you pull from the people around you the stuff that you need, and then you try to give back the stuff that they need.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding what people need, because like I've talked about it before, of like people that provide energy and people that are, I would call energy vampires, that suck energy from you. So you use and sometimes you don't need a ton of energy. I think that's where it's important to be cognizant and really, really self-aware of how you are in a training space with partners, because some days it's high energy, most days it's high energy, but there's some days where, you don't need to be high energy with someone. Maybe they actually prefer to be a little bit reserved and I don't want to say more focused, because that kind of implies that you focus less when you have high energy. And that's not necessarily the case, but maybe a little bit more introverted for the course of the workout, kind of just like in your own head, going through some stuff. So I think that's really important how you mentioned that, is like being what the other person needs and kind of hoping that that gets reciprocated on your end as well. Because I've kind of been guilty of that in the past and I've actually like had some pretty aggressive moments with training partners who did the same thing. So I should probably not look like a hypocrite and start correcting it. But sometimes I get like so focused on myself where I'll expect people to get me going during a set or during a training session and then not reciprocate that afterwards. Like I need to be a lot more in tune and in touch with how my training partner's techniques are and stuff like that. So I think that that's something that I could get a little bit better at. But I think that you can also like change in terms of being a person who exercises alone or someone who exercises in a group, because like I think of like runners. Like I know that a lot of runners just love the therapeutic nature of running alone and zoning out and listening to music or just thinking as they're going through. But I also know a few runners who, I don't want to say refuse to run alone, but they almost always run with other people or with a partner or something. And so for me, I've kind of gone through a lot of phases in my life in terms of like lifting, where I've trained by myself for long periods of time and I've trained with training partners for long periods of time. And I think that I've changed, because I used to train alone and I felt like, the same conversation we're having right now about how much better it is to train with someone. That's how I was to the opposite. I used to say the same thing about training alone. and said, I could really never train with someone full time. I would have to be alone, blah, blah, blah. But I think that you can change your opinion on that stuff as time goes on. And that's just kind of part of life because you need different things during different phases of your life. And right now, I feel like I'm really, really benefiting from being around a solid group.
Yeah, I agree. Likewise. Same. 100%.
And it doesn't
It's
necessarily have to be like same goal people because, I mean, in our group, we all have very drastically different goals. But
right.
the mentality is the same as everybody wants to get better at what their goals are. And we're just lucky enough where the alignment of our goals kind of overlaps in terms of what we need to do to reach them.
Right. We can all use the same alley, the same road, the same road map, like we've talked about in the past, to achieve our goals. The destinations are just a little different.
And so, like, I think that that's like one of the things you can go through, like on your checklist, if you're trying to find someone, like who can I train with, or what do I look for in a training partner? Obviously, mentality is going to be the same, or needs to be the same. And with that, it kind of stems to a lesser degree your personality. And then it always helps, not a necessity, of course, but it helps when you have someone who has like-minded goals because, and our group's a little bit different because of the fact that most of our group doesn't compete and
Right.
that, or has no intentions of competing. So a lot of times it's weird as a competitor, or not necessarily weird, but I'm trying to think of the word I would use. I would say it's not optimal as a competitor to train with someone who isn't a competitor because there's very low pressure for one individual and very high pressure for the other. So
Right.
when you're like, I've talked about it so many times before on the podcast about how a bad workout for a competitor is a big deal and a bad workout for someone who doesn't compete is no big deal at all. So you guys are a little bit different in the sense that you still train like competitors. So I guess it's not really, it's kind of a moot point with us. But I know that that's something that people go through is it's easier to find, or even it's better to find a training partner that shares similar goals because I think the mentality will stem from that.
Absolutely. And and it's also like I guess with our group, it's really fun to watch, like learning each other. Like for instance, I told Chad the other day how great he looked or how big he was getting, and he was like, "No, I'm not." And I had to learn the context of what he meant because I'm
Yeah.
not a competitor.
And I think that that's important too, because it's like what I look at it is I look at it like a classroom.
Hmm.
So when you're a teacher, you have a classroom and treating everybody fairly doesn't mean treating everybody the same. That's something that you kind of learn in education. And I have people, and it could be the same thing as a coach too. Like I have football players when I used to coach football. There were players that would feed entirely off of negative reinforcement. So almost, I don't want to say belittling a player or an athlete, but putting them down, yelling at them, screaming at them, that sort of thing kind of acted as a motivator to get better. And there was a small contingency of athletes that were like that. The majority of athletes needed the opposite. They needed positive reinforcement. They needed built up. They needed an encouragement. There's some players that needed to be talked to very, very loudly and aggressively. And there's some that if you talk to them loud and aggressively, they would completely shut down. So I
Yeah, and you
think
lose
that
them.
when you have a training partner or partners, plural, or a training group or a camp or whatever, I think it's important to understand what each person needs and when. And so for me, Chad, well, let's mention, the individual you named, Chad. So Chad likes, I don't want to say likes being put down, but he loves negative reinforcement to a degree where he likes constructive criticism and he needs to be kind of nitpicked in a sense. Like that doesn't look good. That doesn't look good because he's somebody who's hell bent on fixing those issues. Whereas me personally, I like constructive criticism and I've been really open about that. But in terms of bodybuilding, I don't really need that. I kind of need the opposite. And the reason is I think because I'm so hard on myself and so nitpicking on myself that I know what my flaws are so much better than other people. I mean, because I've competed for so many years now, and I know exactly what my flaws are, and I know exactly what the judges are going to say my flaws are, and I know what would be holding me back from winning certain shows. So I think that I need the opposite. And like you said, part of it is when you're in a training group is just learning how to treat everybody, because you don't treat everybody the same, or you shouldn't treat everybody the same.
Right, because you're going to do them an injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like then that kind of gels, or it is a way to figure out if your personalities gel with someone. Because I've had training partners in the past that I just didn't gel with, in a sense. Like no
Yeah.
one that I had like personal issues with, but just like the mentality was different, and it kind of, I don't want to say caused a rift or like friction there, but it just, you could just tell that they weren't benefiting much from me and I wasn't benefiting much from them. They needed someone that was a little bit more similar to them, and I needed someone that was a little bit more similar to me. And the only way to know that is just to go through that learning process. You're not really going to know.
Right. And that's the cool thing that I've learned over the years of being in the gym setting is you could like the gym will almost make an introvert not an introvert anymore.
Yeah.
Because you start to communicate with people that you never would have thought you would have talked to, and not because you don't like them or you don't think they would like you, or they're just not in the typical group of people that you would communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
So good, but if you're training in a new gym, for example, whenever I was new, where we train now, the reason that you and I became buddies and now lifelong friends now to this point is because I needed somebody to explain something to me, and I looked at you like, okay, that guy might know what he's talking about. So I asked the question, but typically in the years before that, I wouldn't have. It takes time. Like once you learn the gym setting, you get better at asking the question, and simple questions usually are the way to start a um I guess a relationship, sort of, right?
Yeah. And I think that when you say that, man, there's like this kind of this cascade conversation that's going to follow it ultimately, just because I have a lot of things that I kind of want to say about that. So this, I think, would be a good opportunity to go to a commercial break. And then when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk a little bit more about entering the gym space, because I think that there's a lot to be said about people who could be potentially intimidated or nervous about starting up in the gym. And I think that most people would find that the gym is an entirely different place than what they put in their mind. And I think that
Uh-huh.
the people that like the patrons that constitute the gym, or it's kind of like the church is not the building, it's the people. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing with the gym. I think that they'll find that the people are significantly different than they would originally have thought too.
Right.
So let's go to a quick commercial break and we'll talk more about that when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right, prior to the break, Justin, you and I mentioned talking about people going to the gym and people's perception of the gym and all that kind of stuff. It is because that was the conversation that kind of was going to be a little bit of a lengthy one. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because it seems like being someone who works at a gym and spends a lot of time there, both in the mornings, evenings, and afternoons, that I come across so many people that have such a skewed interpretation of what the gym really is. It would be
Yeah.
like the old proverb, never judging a book by its cover. There's such an unbelievable amount of misinformation and fallacy when it comes to people's perception of what the gym is and what gym people are like. And you have this all the time where people will come in and say that they're nervous. And I just almost literally on a daily basis, I'll talk to someone who mentions the gym and says that they would like to go or they're thinking about going, and all of them have this constant excuse. And I don't want to say it's an excuse isn't a bad thing, because it's their concerns are at least a little bit validated by the fact that they have no experience, but they're so nervous to get judged at the gym. And that people are going to be so like focused on them and make fun of them and everybody's real fit. First and foremost, I would say that the majority of people that go to the gym aren't very, very, very fit, hence why they're there. And then I would also say that, interestingly enough, everybody that goes to the gym is there for a little bit of a selfish reason, because whether it's, something that's vain, like aesthetics, and you want to look better, or you want better health, ultimately it just boils down to self-improvement. And it's interesting because everybody seems so worried about what other people are thinking about them. But the irony is that everybody is so focused on themselves that they don't even notice anybody else.
Right.
Like when I'm at the gym, like I'm focused on myself and my training partners. Like I could honestly train alongside someone. Like let's take the mornings, for example, when there's not a lot of people there. Right. We could have maybe 5 other people besides us, and I could not tell you a single thing in terms of exercises or what body part any of the other 5 people train. Like I could work out next to someone who's not in my group for an hour and a half, and I wouldn't notice what body part they were training that day, just because I'm not focused on them at all. So I think that if there's people listening, that would be the first thing I would bring up in this conversation. Is there's anybody's listening out there that wants to go to the gym or is thinking about starting, kind of like a New Year's resolution type thing, just obviously later in the year. I know this is easy for me to say because I'm obviously in the gym all the time and super comfortable in that type of setting, but it's really not a judgmental place, and people are too worried about their own lives to really care about yours.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to that. If you've been to a gym and you have gotten that reaction from that gym, you're in the wrong gym.
Yeah. Yes.
They're everywhere. Gyms are like Dollar Generals in almost every small town across this country. There's one on every corner. So don't give up on the gym, on your personal fitness because of one bad experience. Well, because that's a lot of it too. Is like sometimes, I've been to gyms that are bad, but not what I thought they would be. You know what I mean? So, but I didn't give up on the gym. I just found another one.
Yep.
Because, and I guess that kind of sparks another topic that to branch off of that. Early on, you said because of for vain reasons or selfish reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. And maybe you could answer the question because it's something I've never asked, but why is it vanity? Why is it considered vanity to want to optimize your self-performance, your self-look, your self-worth?
You know what, man? There's a lot of things like that society deems as somewhat unacceptable. I don't know if unacceptable is the right term, but you're not supposed to, like the money thing that you and I have talked about too. As I've gotten older, because I used to say when I was younger, because you kind of raised in the environment that preaches that it's not about money, it's about the type of character you have. And it's about investing in personal progress and not financial progress. And money can't buy happiness. And if you're someone who does something with the ideology of trying to get more money, it's kind of looked at as a bad thing. And I've talked a lot about this on the podcast before, is as I've gotten older, I've kind of shied away from that and say it's perfectly acceptable to want more money for comfort and for providing for your family or getting the nice things that you want. I mean, that's kind of the American dream, right? Is having the freedom to pursue a love interest that you have and make money doing it and live happily ever after. So right. I think that the gym is kind of very, very similar. Like I've told you, remember when we had our conversation with Austin Culver? Yes. Episode 116, maybe
16. Yeah.
I'm just guessing. Anyway, I'll post the link up to that one too. When we had our conversation with him, I said that I welcome all clients of all goals. Like, even if someone says, I just really, really want to get a 6-pack. Sometimes in a gym setting, you're taught that that's really superficial and it's not just about a silly goal like that. It should be like something bigger. But like if the person just wants to lose a few pounds and have visible six pack, then awesome. Let's go get that goal. I don't
Let's
understand why,
accomplish that.
because I agree with you. Like when I use the term vanity, there's obviously negative connotations there, but I don't think wanting to improve the way you look is a bad thing, because there's positive health ramifications that are going to come from that. But even if there aren't, like, who cares? If
Well,
I'm unhealthy, I'd rather look good than be ugly and unhealthy.
well, and the psychological like warfare that most Americans go through every single day of how they look,
Mm-hmm.
it negatively affects their life. You know, when I look in the mirror, I'm not happy.
Yep.
And at some point, I'm going to look in the mirror and be like, that's what I'm talking about. So, and I'm doing something about it. But before the gym, I wasn't doing anything about it. So there was no hope on the horizon.
Yeah, I don't think happiness really comes, and it's not just a physique thing. Like, it's like, take the money thing too. I think that's a good example as well. I feel like the happiness is not the end. You're never going to get happiness from the goal. You get happiness from the journey. I know that sounds really, really corny, but it's true, because there is no end goal. So like if you're trying to pursue independence, financial independence or financial freedom, or pursue earning a lot of money, you're never going to be happy. Like there's never going to be a position or an end line or a goal where you're like, oh, okay, now I consider myself to have a lot of money. Because you could save in the bank and have a $500 or $1,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 or $1 million. And as that keeps increasing, you keep wanting more. But you get happiness and comfort from the feeling of the journey of continuously adding more money to your bank. And it's the same thing with your physical goals. When you look in the mirror and see yourself, and you're never going to be happy or you're never going to be satisfied. But you're getting, like you said, you're working towards it. So
Right.
you may kind of in your mind envision an end goal, but even if you're not at the end goal, you feel better because you're making progress towards it.
Exactly. And that's just something I always thought about. Like, I hate the term vanity compared to the gym. And
Yeah.
now I guess I have to say that there probably is certain cases of that, but for the most part, I'd say a large percentage is not that. It's just people trying to better themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of words, and vanity being one of them, that's has negative connotations associated with it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just kind of the stigma that society puts on certain things. But again, just to kind of hammer on the point even more, I just feel like there's nothing wrong with someone superficially wanting to improve the way they look. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, in my opinion.
I have to agree 100%.
Yeah.
I think it would almost shed complacency if you didn't want to improve the way you look, or the way you have, how much money you have in the bank, or what you drive, or your job position, or your title, or or your status in life. I think it would. I think complacency is sat in if you don't want to do those things.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I used to think about this a lot when I was a kid. I remember being in high school, and all throughout high school, I always used to say, I can't imagine what it would be like to be just a quote normal high school student who doesn't play sports. And people would always like look at me funny, like, well, obviously there's a enormous amount of the population that goes to high school and doesn't play sports. And I said, yeah, but that's strange to me, especially when people aren't high academically withstanding. So like if you have someone who plays sports in high school, a lot of times that's what they're working towards all the time, like with
Right.
practices and off-season lifting and all those things that go into playing a sport. You're constantly working at that. Likewise with grades. Just because you don't play sports doesn't mean anything. If you have someone who gets really, really good grades and they're very, very passionate about trying to get their grades as high as they can, they're constantly working towards that. And I remember saying in high school so many times that it would just be weird for me to be someone that doesn't get good grades and doesn't play sports, because I feel like you would almost be on autopilot. You just come to school, you kind of go through the motions, and then you go home. Whereas I would go to school to get good grades and to play sports and focused on these things at all times. It's kind of like my dad always used to say, and I've said it on the air before, if anything's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I couldn't imagine doing things on a regular basis that I wasn't trying to get better at. Like even as a teacher or a trainer or as a coach, it's not just me personally with lifting, but like all those things. Like I try to get better at them every single day. And I couldn't imagine dedicating large chunks of my day to something if I wasn't actively trying to improve it. That would be just a colossal waste of time. I couldn't even envision it.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. You know, it's like, I don't know. I couldn't imagine it either. You know, I never thought about it like that. It's like from that perspective. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I really don't think of a time where I didn't want to be better at what I was doing or make progress in that area. I don't think I used to talk about it like we do now. You know, I don't think it was hyperly at the top of my mind, right? Progress. But it was always the underlying goal was to get better.
Well, that's one of the things that when I was on, I did a podcast with Dr. Edwin Adams, who was actually a guest on our show, one of the past episodes. I'll have to link that one too and post it up because it's a great listen. And I was a guest on his podcast twice. Well, I remember that one of the episodes that we had done together, he asked me, essentially, paraphrasing here, essentially he was asking, what is stopping people from taking action? Because we kind of surmised that everybody wants to get better at stuff. Like, I don't think there's people who don't want to get better at things. Like, I'm sure every person would like more money. I'm sure every person would like to look better. I'm sure every person would want better health. And he was asking me, why do some people act on it and some people don't? Because like you mentioned, throughout your whole life, you've always wanted to be better at everything. So like when you went through a period of kind of like the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of your life, when you went through those valleys, those deep valleys of all the weight gain and stuff, like you always wanted to get better. What was the block that was stopping you from getting better? And he asked me that, and I can't remember exactly the discussion that kind of followed after that, but it's interesting to think about that, how everybody wants self-improvement, but only some people act on it. Is it because they want it more, or is it because they have better resources? Like, do they have more, are they more resourceful in that sense? Like, it just makes you wonder why some people act on it and some people are so stagnant, even though we seemingly all kind of want the same thing.
Right. And that would be something that's really an interesting topic. And I believe that's one for, like, if you wanted my answer, that's a long drawn out answer. But I think the Reader's Digest version of my opinion is intimidated. People are intimidated by failure. Like, they do not want to try and fail.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize that failure is part of success. Like, it's just part of the journey. You have to do things the wrong way before you can do them the right way. Because nobody, like, I used this analogy somewhere the other day. I believe I had a safety meeting at work, and I was talking about short service employees. So people that are new to the industry and new to our company, right? And I said, look guys, none of us started in the oil field as seasoned oil field employees. You may have started at this company or this job or this position seasoned, but at some point we're all new. So it's like a responsibility of the people to take them new people under their wing and at least give them the ropes. So I guess that goes back to the gym, right? Those of us who are in the gym, it's like our responsibility. Like, that's why I feel it truly is a responsibility. And that's why I always get myself kind of in a bind when somebody says, hey, I'd love to come train with you. Come on, man, let's go. because that's always my answer. Because like it's a responsibility to help people get into that world. Because I hope that everybody that wants to comes into that world and surpasses me. That they have that much talent or that much ability that they get way better than I ever could be.
Yeah, that's really kind of changing topics here. This may be a discussion for another day, but that's kind of the sign of someone who's good at what they do. If it's a public service thing where they're helping people, because you say that about coaching a lot. Like the sign of a good coach from a nutrition standpoint, like someone who works with like physique athletes or a trainer, the sign of a good trainer or a coach is someone who can make someone better than they ever were. So like as someone who competes, a sign of a good coach would be for me to make people look better than I do or look better than I ever could. That kind of shows an area of I guess, of mastery over your craft.
Right, because you're focusing on that person more than you do yourself.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that we all go through. And, you know, that's something that I've battled the past couple of years that I'm slowly trying to find balance there. Because financially, I can't give up focusing on other people, and morally and ethically, I wouldn't want to either. But I kind of wrestle around with that in my head because I need to continue to refocus on myself a little bit better and prioritize myself, because if I'm not mentally happy, then I can't make other people mentally happy as well. So that's kind of the ongoing inner conflict that I kind of go through and have dialogue in my own head. And I'm sure that a lot of people suffer with that as well.
I'd have to say, I guarantee it.
All right, man. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap this up. Any last thoughts or closing words you'd like to fit in before we shut her down for the day?
You know, yeah. If you're one of those people that want to go to the gym and you're intimidated or you're awkward or you think it's going to be a bunch of meatheads throwing weight around and you don't want that, I bet you do want that, right? Because you just don't realize it yet. Once you get into that environment, you'll see that it's a freeing feeling to get to do something every single day.
Yes. Yep. I agree, man. I think that's a great place to end it. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Trees podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 121. As always, we appreciate your listenership and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the edge and